Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to Partnerships for Profit. Today I'm your host, Giovanna Rossini, and I am here with our guest, Brennan Heuser, who is a personal injury attorney and partner at Heuser Heuser LLP. How are you doing today, Brennan?
Doing well. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you. Honestly, I was looking at your past even before you took your first step into personal injury. You went through a lot. I am so curious. Please tell me a little bit about how you first got into you're doing your research analyst focus on counterterrorism, and then you somehow worked your way all the way to this.
Yeah,
I'm so curious.
It's been an interesting journey. When I graduated college, I grew up in DC, so I moved back to DC, and I was working for this think tank downtown called the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. And I could only go so far there. They told me the only way you're really going to get a career in DC is if you have a security clearance, you speak a language, or you know somebody. I didn't have any of that. And this is the height of the war. And it kind of overlapped with what I was researching. So I looked at options with the military and ultimately ended up enlisting and joining psychological operations with the U.S. Army Special Operations Command out of Fort Bragg. Yeah. So
Wow.
Did that for 5 years. I did multiple deployments. I was over in Pakistan, Afghanistan. It's interesting deployments because I was it's like wearing local clothes. I never had a military uniform, living in these different areas in that region. And I speak Dari, so I was able to talk with locals, and pretty unconventional deployments there. But it was rough.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Dari, it's a language I haven't actually heard of. What country is that connected to?
It's related to Persian Farsi, and
Okay.
it's just a slightly different dialect. They call it in Afghanistan, Tajik, and Tajikistan. It's all Persian.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, I haven't heard of that one, so I was just like, ooh,
yeah, not many
interesting.
people speak it, especially in Colorado, so it hasn't come in handy out here too much.
Darn. That's a shame because it takes so much to learn a language and then you just don't use it anymore.
It does. It's a beautiful language, so I really am happy that I got to learn that. But I do 5 years there. It was rough though. You know, those deployments were not easy. And after my contract ended, I decided to get out, and I go back to DC and start grad school. Really interesting program, not very practical. I learned how to do, it was political warfare. So that's not political science. This is all the, how to overthrow a government, how to manipulate people, in proxy to key leaders and certain positions of power overseas. It's pretty interesting. It's what the CIA does, and that's kind of what the program was tailored towards. And it helped me.
But you didn't do CIA route.
No, I didn't. I wanted to get my foot in the door and get back into the government, so I joined the State Department and ended up working pretty closely with the Fulbright program and the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs over there.
What's the Fulbright program?
The Fulbright program is a international exchange program. It started, I think, around 1950, and the goal of the program was to create connections and relationships with upcoming leaders in foreign countries. So it's pretty prestigious. Only so many people get to apply or get to come from each country, and then they find a university in the U.S. and they come here for 6 months or a year. And we also send American students overseas. So it's to create those relationships for upcoming leaders to hopefully influence foreign policy to the benefit of the U.S. and NATO aligned interests.
Yeah, I can imagine that being really important, especially since we've moved away from that whole monarchy situation for the most part, where
Yeah.
everybody was related to everybody.
It's one of those big soft power initiatives, and
Hmm.
it was very effective for a long time, and yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. So you did all of these things, and then you decided to go into personal injury. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got from there to there?
I never thought I was going to be an attorney. I swore it off as a kid, and I didn't see that coming. I remember working at the office that I'm at now as a kid. It was just paperwork. I just remember just endless amount of paperwork coming in, and it didn't seem like it was for me. I wanted to be outside, but I got that out of my system. I was having a rough time though in DC, just from my military deployments, and my PTSD was pretty bad. So being still kind of in the foreign policy area in DC, the war is very much top of mind at that in 2012, 13, and I needed to get out of there and change things up. So
Yeah, I could see that just not being a really good, shall I say, environment for your mind to be in when you're already struggling with PTSD. So yeah, I can definitely see why you'd want to get out and why paperwork would suddenly be so much more appealing.
yeah, so here's the thing though, is there's a lot of stress in the law. So you're kind of changing out one thing for another, but it was a good transition for me, and I'm ultimately better off for it.
Yeah, tell us, like, you must have developed some really good, like, coping strategies. Like, are you able to share some of those with your clients when they're going through these, like, really hard times in their lives? I'm sure some of them have gone through some really hard things.
It is rough. I think one of the most important things for me was not self-isolating. I think a lot of people that have PTSD tend to do that. So maintaining the relationships that you have, if you can find buddies who've been through something similar, that's always helpful. But having those connections has been pretty key for me. And I did go through a period where I just kind of shut everybody out as a self-defense mechanism. I think trying to do some type of physical movement. I don't like to do intense activity anymore. I'm a big walker. So a stroll or something, just a couple mile walk around the neighborhood or in the mountains around here is pretty helpful. And to be honest, Giovanna, cannabis was a big part of the appeal of Colorado. I wanted to get off of, what the VA was doing with me, and cannabis helped. So it was a really good move for me.
Might not have been the best coping strategy long term, but I'm sure it did help for at least a little while.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because you can do little tinctures under your tongue. You're not hurting your lungs, and there's CBD and different types of ways to take it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I think it has medical use, and I'm really happy that Colorado is supporting that.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that it worked out for you regardless.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, though. You went through a lot. So how would you say this impacts the way you practice law and how you work with clients?
I think one of the key advantages I have after going through all of that is the ability to handle the unexpected, stressful situation. When you're overseas, you train and train and train and train for your worst day, so, enemy contact, and something happens. And all of those plans, all that training, to a certain extent, gets thrown out the window as far as it doesn't go how you plan. There's always something unexpected, and they call it the fog of war. So you have to be able to adapt. Now, there's certain fundamentals that you always go back to, and that's where that muscle memory from the training comes in play. But that ability to adapt, think on your feet, and move fast and methodically is something that you also have to do in the law. No two cases are the same. No two problems are the same, and outcomes can vary as well. as well as the strength and the ability of your opponent on the other side that you're arguing with. So I think managing multiple issues, unexpected issues, adapting, thinking quick, and not letting that kind of crush you is something that has been a huge advantage for me.
All right. Now, before I ask this next question, I want to clarify something. So when you take on a client, would you say you often end up in the courtroom, or does it often get handled with the paperwork beforehand? Because I know it's not always necessary to have to take it into a courtroom.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of these cases settle. I'd say over 90% of personal injury cases settle, and that's just, practice area wide across the country. And that means you still have cases that you have to file a lawsuit on. That said, even when you do that, there's mediation involved in a long process of discovery. And usually you can get that resolved without actually going to court. I view actually having to go to court as someone failed somewhere, either in managing expectations or just misunderstanding an important part or points of the law. You should be able to work things out and persuade and influence people to come to some type of settlement. So
there's that word again, influence, something you're good at, right?
Yes, and that comes from a lot of that training with psychological operations. The motto is persuade, change, and influence, and it's a really cool skill set to have, to be able to study human psychology and human behavior and what makes people tick. How is someone receptive or not receptive to a certain type of message and the delivery there? All of that is relevant in how you're dealing with your clients, but also how you're dealing with opposing counsel from the insurance company. So it's a really important skill set to have.
Now, I won't ask you to reveal all your secrets or anything, but would you be able to tell us like a little story of an example of just how you were able to do this?
Yeah. I like this story because it worked overseas, and it was something we just came up with and wanted to try it. So there's a high value target located in Afghanistan. Actually, no, he was located in Pakistan, but the militant group was located in Afghanistan. A lot of these guys would go to Pakistan during certain seasons to get away from the Americans and rest and plan. So we wanted to get him back over to Afghanistan to either capture or kill him. So we had these wanted leaflets that we dropped over the village where this group was located. But instead of listing this guy as the most wanted, we listed his number 2 with a higher bounty. And when he got word of that, he thinks that there's some type of dissent or mutiny in the ranks, and he comes over to Afghanistan to try to settle things down, and he ends up getting targeted that way. So you're kind of manipulating someone's trust in their own group and forcing them to move when they otherwise wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm. Like, he would have just stayed put if you were threatening him directly.
He would.
You had to outthink him and surprise him.
Yeah, and that's a really good example. Here's another one, though. You never want to attack someone's cognitive bias head on. You want to go with the narrative, and it needs to be something that they can relate to. So we worked very closely with Afghan poets and artists and created these traditional type songs called Taranas. And they were good songs because these were legitimate musicians in the area, very, very talented. But they created these poems set to a little bit of music. It's still traditional. And it had positive messaging, anti-extremist messaging, but not over the top. And we put this on websites for free. So the shopkeepers could download it, and then they can share it with their associates and people in the public by just Bluetooth. So instead of having this massive distro operation, it just organically would spread throughout the whole country, and your message would get out there with a local influencer using local language and historical allegories and narratives that didn't meet resistance from the target audience.
And you would say that you use a lot of these methods, well, maybe not on quite so grand a scale, but when negotiating for your clients, figuring out a way to softly, subtly get someone to maybe change their position or realize they have a problem in their logic.
Yeah, it goes back to if someone is dug in on a certain position, you're probably not going to get too far on that, and you tend to get bigger pushback. So you have to find ways to break down that barrier where people are receptive to your message, and that changes case by case depending on the facts and the person that you're dealing with.
I always like to say you have to make that other person think it was their idea.
Yeah, that's a absolutely legit principle.
Okay, so that's good. I didn't know that I for sure had anything, but I'm glad that you confirmed that for me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, what are some misconceptions that people have about persuasion, especially when it comes to legal advocacy?
I think one big misperception is that you're just arguing all the time, and it just needs to be some knockdown, drag out fight. All these attorneys, I'll fight for you. Yes, you're advocating. You don't necessarily need to be rude or belligerent with the other side. Being collegial and knowing how to work with someone is usually the better way to handle that.
Yeah. I've always kind of had the logic that when is the last time you changed someone's mind by shouting at them?
Yeah,
It's usually not that.
No, that never works, and it usually makes them more resistant to anything else you have to say.
Instead, you want to slowly introduce more and more of your idea over and over again, kind of exposing them to it.
And here's something that insurance adjusters are really good at. They're very friendly, or they can be on the phone. And if you're doing a recorded statement, before it even starts, there's a few minutes of just conversation before they press record. And it makes you feel like they're your friend. They're not your friend. They want you to let your guard down. They know that people love talking about themselves. So the more they can get you to talk in broad terms, the more likely it is that you're going to say something that could be misconstrued and possibly used against you. So I think they're trained in it. I don't know what their onboarding is, but across the board, they all seem to do this. So if we agree to do one for a client, they're not your friend. This is an interrogation. Just answer the question. That's it. And then if they want to follow up, they can ask a follow-up.
Honestly, yeah, that all makes sense to me. And honestly, it's really interesting to just hear how you approach it, because so many people I speak to are more about let's fight it. Let's fight for you, which, yes, there is merit to that. But it really is interesting hearing your kind of softer, more subtle approach to this.
Yeah, it works. You get a better outcome. You're still fighting for your client. You're just doing it in a more effective way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, we are getting to the end of our time. Otherwise, I would have loved to keep talking about this with you. It's so interesting. But before we do, please let our audience know where they could find you, or maybe where they could read some more of what your philosophy is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is Heuser Law, HEUSER law.com. We have two offices, one in Colorado Springs and one in Pueblo. We primarily serve Southern Colorado, and we're personal injury and workers' compensation. There's a lot of information on our website. My bio has a lot as well. And if you go to our YouTube page, I talk in a lot more depth about some of this history and background on there.
All right. Well, thank you again. We really appreciated having you here today. So thank you for joining us. This episode has been brought to you by LeDuc Entertainment for podcasting, social media, personal branding, and video. We'll see you next time. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.
All right.